Hi, I'm here with Donvan and Caren Zucker. We're at UCLA where they're about to give a talk about their new book, In a Different Key, which has made the New York Times bestseller list. Thank you so much for joining me, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Alex, it's always great to talk to you.
So tell me what the inspiration was for you guys to make this book, to write it.
Well, we both worked at ABC News for a couple decades, and my son had been diagnosed with autism in 1996, and a few years after that we started reporting on autism. We started reporting on all the stories that hadn't been told before. It was really a time that network television hadn't covered autism at all, and we talked about kids who were bullied and siblings and girls, because we only always talked about boys. And about a half a dozen years through, we sort of looked at each other and said we needed to do something more enduring.
And the reason that we decided to look at the past, my wife's brother, who was born and raised and still lives in Israel, was diagnosed with autism in the late 1960s. And his mom, my mother-in-law, told me, in many ways there have been a lot of obstacles and struggles, but things are much, much better than they used to be. And I said, well, how were things before? And she began talking about the past, and there was such an unknown story about the struggles that individuals and families overcame and had to fight through generations before that nobody knew, that Caren and I decided, well, let's look at the past. And let's look at the past in a way to inspire people about the future.
Let me ask you something. What do you think the most shocking revelation you came across in writing your book was?
That's an interesting question. Shocking? I think that because we were journalists covering the issue for so many years, we knew about Lovas and the fact that he had shocked children, and that was a type of therapy that had changed dramatically over the years, but in the early days that it was,
I didn't mean literally shocking, I meant.
No, but, we just sort of hit it.
Happens to be. Yeah. There were other things. How routinely children were institutionalized, usually for life. How inside the institutions, children who were self-injurious, the response was just to tie them down, and children spent their lives tied down, and as adults tied down. That the LSD experiments were really not really monitored by anybody. There was an experiment taking place in New York that gave LSD to children twice a day for months at a time. We discovered the work of an Austrian historian named Herwig Czech, who had looked into the past of Hans Asperger, who developed...
That's the most shocking. That was the most shocking and heartbreaking news. Really.
Yeah, because people had really seen Asperger as kind of a heroic figure, not well known, but heroic. We thought so too, and then we came across the work of this historian who had been looking into Asperger's past for the last several years, and he discovered documents establishing, unfortunately, with great credibility, that Asperger had signed documents that sent very, very severely disabled children to the place where the Nazis were killing these kids. We're not saying that there's evidence that he did this many, many, many times, but he did it at least once, possibly twice in one place, and in another place he helped to select children at a mental institution, those who could be sent to school and learn, and those who couldn't learn, they were dispatched to this place and they died.
And his reputation is that of a hero, and we don't discount all of the work he did and how much he changed the world for people with autism, and
which was tremendous.
The idea of a spectrum and of a higher functioning and different abled person. We can't call him a hero.
And we can't cover it up. I mean, we can't. It was, as journalists finding that, it was shocking, but we had to report it.
Well, I totally understand. It was certainly shocking to me. Let's change the tone a little bit and ask you what the most inspirational part of writing this book was for you.
To see how educators and families and self-advocates have sort of changed the face of how the world sees autism. I mean, really, people were... And John just mentioned that before, were in institutions that you didn't know anybody with autism because they were away, they were put away. And we hadn't educated people with autism because the laws said you didn't have to. And so those kind of things have just changed everything for people.
The world needed to change, and the world did change. It's not completely done, but the world did change thanks to self-advocates, to families, to parents, to compassionate researchers. They really did change the world, not completely, but there's a story we tell near the end of the book about a scene that took place in 2007, really happened on a bus in New Jersey, 2006, I'm sorry. And a young man was sitting on a bus by himself, and he had autism, he wasn't verbal, he began rocking, he began stimming, flipping his fingers in front of his face. And this really bothered two passengers who were sitting behind him, and they began to harass this guy. Something that happens all too often. They began to harass him, and they lean in him, and they say to him, "Hey, buddy, man, what's your problem anyway?"
And then all of a sudden this other passenger jumps up and says, "Hey, he's got autism. What's your problem? Why don't you get off his back?" And then the whole bus got behind this young man and embraced him, and the bad guy was the bully who was harassing him. And to us, that sort of symbolizes, everything that can be right about a community.
Right.
If you embrace the person.
And that's the inspiration.
Different.
The inspiration is that the world has changed, that there were enough, that guy on the bus who defended the young man was there and got it, and that the other passengers were willing to take that side. And, the bully problem is still there. That's a real thing. But 50 years ago, nobody would have stood up for that young man. That young man wouldn't even have been on that bus.
Yeah, that's a great story. I really find that inspirational. What do you hope most people get out of this book? What do you think the biggest message that people will get from this book is?
Well, we'd like it to get outside of the autism community. That's sort of, and the message is the one that we just told you.
Yeah.
But our goal is not just the autism community to read this and enjoy it, because we think they will, because they're 46 short stories of the history of autism through people who lived it. But we're hoping that people outside of the autism community will get invested by reading it and getting to know and understand people with autism better.
Yeah. We wrote it to be a great read, so that people who don't care about autism will still find it a great read, and that by the end they will care about autism.
That's great. And I'm in the book as well. Why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Well, that's because you're a superstar. We talk about people who change the world. You changed the world, Alex Plank. You didn't set out to do that. As you told us, and as we tell in the book, when you set up the website Wrong Planet about now 11 years ago, you were looking for company. You were a kid diagnosed with Asperger's in college. You knew computers. You knew programming.
Well, in high school originally.
Oh, in high school, right?
Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
And you knew programming, and you used that skill to sort of put together a site, trying to find more people like yourself, and let's talk, let's communicate. And boom, you created a phenomenon, which was the first real online community for people with Asperger's to meet and talk with each other. That we consider that changing the world, because you harnessed the net to create a community that didn't exist there before. Not only that, you've become an ambassador for the spectrum. You have destigmatized tremendously something that was very laden with stigma before, and that's why we picked your story to tell. I mean, I'm flattering you a lot here. You have to at some point.
Thank you.
Shucks, not me, but
Well,
you did.
maybe.
Yeah, well, you did. Caren, you want to add to that?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah, that's why you're in the book.
Well, thank you, and it's really great to hear from you guys. And I'm really happy that what I set out to do has affected so many people, and I'm really glad that you guys have made such a meaningful book that I think will, help people for generations to come. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, Karen's got a son. We haven't talked about that. Who's named Mickey, who's 21 years old now.
I guess that's the thing, which is our book tells us about how far we've come, but it doesn't fix the problems of the future. We haven't figured it out, and we mostly haven't figured it out for adults.
Adults is the issue, yeah.
And so we hope that the past gives us the chance to look towards the future, to make a difference in the future the way that everyone has done so far.
Well, that's a great message, and thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
always.
And everyone, the book is in a different key. Buy it any bookstore, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I'm sure there's other bookstores out there as well. Thank you so much. Bye. Let me go check to make sure we were recording. Yep.
We're good?
Hold on, let me see.